Um, Good. So the next question I have is I don't unfortunately get a lot of ladies on to interview, and uh, and often there'll be nuns. So this is more of a lady, a woman in academia and in the world question. So how would you respond, and how do you respond, I suppose, to people that argue that Orthodox Christianity is sexist?
Well, you timed this very well, because I usually just get annoyed when I'm asked that question. But I decided that was not a proper response. And so I already had thought of what I should say, because we were just in Ohio speaking, and someone just, as I was leaving, said, "What do you consider the position of women in the church?" So anyway, now I have a pretty good answer, I think. So I even have a couple of notes about it. But it's really a huge topic, and I'm assuming that the only reason someone would say that really is because women don't serve liturgically. So that's my assumption. I just want to make, in this context, 3 points about that. First of all, we always have to consider the primary goal or purpose of something in order to properly evaluate or understand how or why anything is organized. So, to give a crude analogy, if you have a card game in mind and it's Go Fish, where the goal is to collect as many tricks or cards as possible, if you apply that same understanding to someone playing the game of solitaire, where the goal is to get rid of all your cards, you're never going to understand what they're doing and why they're doing it, because the goal is different. So we have to ask, first of all, what's the goal of Orthodox Christianity? We can describe that many ways: deification, acquiring the Holy Spirit, being filled with the gifts of the Spirit, love, life, peace, joy, becoming a saint, living with the life of God, loving with the self-emptying, self-sacrificial love of Christ, including living eternally in bliss. And that's achieving the highest, best state possible for human beings. So that's the goal of Orthodox Christianity. And all baptized, faithful men, women, and children, they're all called to that exact same highest calling. And they can and have achieved it. We have many women saints who are highly venerated. We have, I went to meet a well-known holy Greek woman, Mother Macrina. The priests were kissing her hand. Everybody was hanging on her every word. So, in light of the consistent teaching of the saints through the centuries on spiritual growth, I think, if anything, women, especially in their traditional roles, have a certain advantage in achieving the primary goal of Christianity. Because that goal is necessarily reached through humility and that self-sacrificial love of Christ. So if somebody is looking at the church and thinks that women are not being valued, or that it's sexist, whatever term you want to use, it seems to me that they can only come to that conclusion by prioritizing a different goal and different means of attaining that goal. And it also, it seems to me, comes from a kind of clericalism, as if only the clergy and the people serving are really valued or honored. So it also, in that sense, involves seeking honor and public recognition, which was condemned by Christ himself when James and John were seeking it. And he says, that's the opposite to how things work in my kingdom. You're never going to flourish as a human being doing that. And so the third thing I just want to mention, it's also related to the problem of not valuing the role of the laity. Because after all, it isn't just women who are laity. Most men are laity as well. Most Christians are laity. And I think that comes from not valuing prayer as the critical action in worship. I was so blessed to have that teaching from Metropolitan Anthony that, what he taught is that it's a sacrifice to sing in the choir or to serve. The ideal thing is to stand and pray. That's the best place you can be in worship. It's a sacrifice to do anything else, not something to be seeking after. And the whole liturgy is organized and set up to promote prayer in preparation for properly receiving the body and blood of Christ, God incarnate. You're receiving Christ himself. If that isn't enough for you, I'm sorry, something is really wrong with the way you're understanding things.
Yeah.
So that's my soapbox on that topic.
Good. No, I think it's important because people are so saturated in the ways of the world, and they bring that with them into
Absolutely.
the church. Yeah.
Right. Well, I could tell you an interesting thing that Saint Sophrony told me. You might want to have that on the record.
Sure.
Anyway, as a new Orthodox, I was having a problem with judging people for not really being Orthodox. I think that's a common temptation. So I asked Saint Sophrony about that, and he said, to be really Orthodox means to know God as he is and to worship him as he should be worshiped. And so I realized we're all on a journey,
Yeah. You may have heard that story while you were at Essex, and actually, as you were saying your story, I was like, oh, maybe you were the person that the story refers to. But so when I was there, at some point, I was told this story that a young lady had become Orthodox and came to the monastery and had obviously had some kind of rapport with Father Sophrony and said, Father Sophrony, I've become Orthodox. And his eyes got really big, and he said, "You've become Orthodox. All my life, I've been trying to become Orthodox."
That's beautiful. No, that wasn't.
Yeah, so I really like that story, and I think it helps people shift their thinking, I think.
Yeah.
But I thank you for sharing that. And if you have any other stories you want to share, please do so. Because I think, especially first person accounts. I mean, I can tell that story as a second person account, but when it's first person, it's more powerful.
Right.
So the third question is kind of following in some ways on the last one, given that most maybe women coming out of the culture, have these ideas. Do you have any advice for Orthodox women interested in pursuing a theological education?
Well, first I would say, what is your primary goal in pursuing it? These days, if it's personal enrichment, there is so much that you can get from books, online. There's so many things available without having to do a formal course of study. If you want to teach theology or something, then you have to do the formal course of study. And you just have to be really careful where you go if you're not going to an Orthodox place, and to be careful. There's a good, vibrant parish for you to be connected to, that you have a really balanced, solid spiritual director to help guide you. Um, those would be my main things. Things are changing all the time. When David and I were first teaching at St. Tikhon's, pretty much you knew everybody who had a doctorate who was Orthodox. You just pretty much did. Now there's all kinds of people, and they're teaching and having blogs and doing things, and there's just such an abundance of wealth. We have to be careful we don't get drowned